we're still talking about Mr. George Brizan. With me now is Miss Beverley Steele. Good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning. Good morning, listeners.
We're going to talk a little bit about some of the books, some of the many books that Mr. Brizan wrote. Of course, you've come in with a lot of these books. I'd say about the two most popular, the two that you hear about the most were Grenada, Island of Conflict, and then, of course, Grenadas, Black Gold, and Nutmeg. Tell us a little bit about the books that he wrote.
Well, George had over 10 books and numerous articles, reports, papers, and so on. He was a prolific writer and researcher. Towards the end of his life, you know, he had a problem with his sight. But that didn't stop him. With his daughter, he brought out this one, Grenada, Fortitude and the Human Condition.
Mm-hmm.
So this was perhaps the last one. And he also brought out this one shortly after with Michael Jessamy. So even after his sight failed, you know, he continued to research using other people's eyes to supplement his own failing eyesight.
Right.
I think it was the greatest pity that his eyesight was affected by the diabetes, because he could have done much more in his retirement had he had his full sight. But nevertheless, people who remain sighted throughout their life have not produced as much as he has in the short time he had.
Yeah, well, it's evident. He says quite a lot of books here that he's done. Why did he choose the different topics that he chose?
Well, I think the different topics, especially the books that I have here, represent his wide range of interests. His first writings were about agriculture, because he was deeply rooted in that scene. One of them that I do not have is a little monograph, a small book published by the University of the West Indies on the peasantry and proto-peasantry in Grenada from the 1930s to 1951, I think it was. I think my copy, when I was looking for it last night, blew away with Ivan. I lost so many things, and when I go to look for them, they're not there. But that's a very important pamphlet. And he also wrote several articles on immigration. I think one of his underlying concerns, although I've never really heard it brought forward, was that the population of Grenada needed to be blended into one. And this comes out in this book, Grenada, Fortitude and the Human Condition, because it really addresses the different streams of people who make up Grenada's population. And I think behind that was a little hope that whatever differences we have because of our origins, we would come together as one people. So
this is the one he did with his daughter?
Yes, right? That's the one that he did with his daughter.
Okay.
George was also a very good churchman, and he loved the Dominican priests who had served Grenada well throughout its history, and then he did this in honor of the Dominicans in Grenada. The English Dominicans in Grenada since 1901. And I think it was for their centenary to 2001.
Okay. All right. And then, well, and I just want to show these.
Yes.
This was, or am I jumping the gun?
No. I'm glad you're holding that, because I'm going to make a little plea to somebody, please, to reprint it. It is in a very fragile. It was never really printed commercially. It's a mimeograph document, and very, very fragile, and there are not too many copies left. If you will notice, mine has been Ivanized. Ivan got it, but didn't blow it away like the other one, and I had to patch it up. So if somebody would please, you know, out of the memory, me talk about George and how wonderful he was and not a great politician, well, this is something concrete they can do to republish this book because it is so valuable as a history of the nutmeg industry in Grenada from how it came here up to what can be done with it, as we have heard your last speaker say.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and then of course the islands of conflict on which...
Now this is an economic history of Grenada from its very origins right down onto the revolution. It came out in another form before, but after the revolution it was added to and slightly revised and came out in this form. So this is the one we're accustomed to. There was a previous edition also with the same name, but not as comprehensive. This is the first comprehensive history of Grenada. It's a wonderful book. George used every resource he had to write it. He didn't have the resources at the time to go traveling off to England and wherever you find Grenada records kept. But whatever he put his hands on, that he used to produce this great history.
Do you have a favorite?
Well, how can you make a favorite among children? You know, I am a sucker for each of my books is like a child. So when one gets damaged, I cry. When it's lost, I cry even more. But each of them is so different. There's the nutmeg. There's the one about the peasantry and proto-peasantry, which I apparently no longer have. This wonderful economic history. This book on the Dominicans. But I love pictures. And this book is full of pictures, you know. He has recorded for us all the beloved Dominican priests that have served in Grenada.
A couple of them.
You know, wonderful, like Alfred Pike, who served between 1930. People remember his name, but not his picture, so there he is, and so on.
Okay.
These are all picture books. This Grenada Fortitude and Human Condition. It does have some writing in it, but there are a lot of pictures, you know. And they say a picture tells 1,000 words, and so thousands and thousands of words are spoken by these pictures. Now, the importance of a book like this, apart from drawing it all together and putting it in a theme, is that shortly after this one, which is about St. George's, this is about people, and this really is about the town and the growth of it and the buildings in it and so on. Shortly after this one was published, here's a wonderful picture of the Anglican Church. And this picture is important because the Anglican Church is no more. It's just ruins. And the presbytery that went along with it. So these are important pictures, and shortly after Ivan, all of these were borrowed from people. See? Shortly after we had Hurricane Ivan, I remember putting this book in a drawer just to save it, and I was so glad I did, you know, because look, it's nothing happened to this one.
It's in very good condition still.
The pictures got lost. Most people lost pictures. Sometimes they lost the entire collection of pictures which were really historic, you know. Yeah. So George has preserved our history not only in words like in Grenada Island of Conflict, but also in pictures. So as you said, which one do I prefer? We have our picture book of people, we have our picture book of buildings, and then there's this one. This brave young Grenadians also came out just before Ivan, and a lot of the copies, including unsold copies, were destroyed by Ivan, but a few of them survived. This is about Grenada's servicemen who served in World Wars I and II. Most of Grenada now did not experience the war and tend to forget about the whole circumstances surrounding why Grenadians went to fight World War I and why they went to fight World War II. But it's a proud history. We were a colonial country, and people reasoned out for themselves that even in the 1940s, when there was a little bit of anti-imperialism. They reasoned out for themselves that it would be better under British rule than under German totalitarianism. The little freedoms that they had got for themselves by 1939 when the war started were so precious. And when they knew enough about German totalitarianism at the time that those rights would go. And so they said, okay, we don't really like being a colony of England, but we're going to fight. And so we had a number of people who made contributions. Here are two of the nurses who served in England, and pictures of the servicemen. This is the 1st Caribbean Regiment, a group of young soldiers, and women too served in the ATS. So this is a very precious book, and I was born during the war, and I've always had an interest in World War II. And so this to me also is a very precious book. I don't think that there's any of George's books that is not my favorite. They're all my favorites.
Why did he write the books? What was his intended impact? And do you think they had the impact that he was hoping they would?
Well, let me answer your last question first. I think definitely all of George's books have had a tremendous impact. As I said, most of the copies of these were lost in Ivan, and these were limited editions. This one wasn't for sale at all. This one was produced to advertise St. George's and its potential when there was a development plan for it. And so it was given to guests at the opening of the project, but you couldn't buy it. You had to either have been there or beg it like I did. This one was a limited edition also, extremely expensive, and it fell out of circulation very quickly. So that they are very precious books. I'm sorry, as I said, I wish somebody would republish Grenadas Black Gold and republish all of them in his memory. It would be the best memorial that somebody could do for George Brizan, to make sure that every library in every school and every public library in every community center has a copy of his full set of books. Why did he write them? I think he was an educator first and foremost, and he realized that one of the most powerful tools of education is a book. After all, from when you are very tiny and you're going to kindergarten, you have reading books and so on, and then it progresses right up. But when people leave school, the roles of books like The Nutmeg Industry are invaluable for your continuing education, because in high school and even in TAMCC, you are being given the basics and to develop your mind to cope with life outside. The real education comes after you leave school. And I think the purpose in writing all of these books is to educate adults about Grenada and about their environment.
How far-reaching did these books get? Did any of them make it regionally, internationally, or were they all really for the benefit of Grenadians?
Well, George wrote for Grenadians first, and I think this is a wonderful approach. You don't write for an international audience, and this also goes for tourism. You develop your tourist spots for Grenadians first, and then people will come and enjoy what you have created for your own. This book was, the new edition was published by Macmillan, and therefore had an international audience, and it's still being reprinted all over the world. People have this book wherever they are studying Grenada in universities or Caribbean studies, and with the Grenadian diaspora. I'm sure you would find a copy of this in almost every home of somebody who has Grenada connection. I think it is in most libraries, and most students in Grenada doing history would refer to this book. So this one perhaps is the best known internationally of his works. Again, I have to say I am very sorry that some of them had such a limited edition, and hope that something can be done to republish them and make them more available. The little booklet on the peasants and proto-peasantry was published by the University of the West Indies, and therefore was available throughout every territory that supports the university, and in all the university libraries. So that one, you might say, is also international. George also published in the university's journal called Caribbean Quarterly, and that goes all over the world. I don't think that in any scholastic community anywhere the name of George Brizan is unknown. I think everybody would know that he was one of Grenada's foremost scholars.
Okay. In keeping with his legacy, what do you think can be done to encourage more Grenadians to write?
I think first of all they have to have a look at his books and see that it is well within their scope. George was highly intelligent, highly motivated, and he has produced wonderful books, but especially when it comes to the book of pictures. Each book of pictures has an essay to go along with it, but the pictures speak for themselves. On any momentous occasion that we have had, or any particular aspect of Grenadian society, for example, sports, cricket, football, netball, whatever, anyone is capable of going around and collecting pictures and putting them together in some sort of history and writing the caption. You don't have to know everything yourself. You go ahead and you ask people to tell you. There are a lot of older people out there with phenomenal memories, and if you use the basics of all history, that you never write down just one person's memory, you check it against something else. It is a legitimate, a very legitimate form of history, oral history, so that anyone can put together a book. The problem is getting it published. It is really difficult to bring writing or a collection of photographs or a collection of anything into print. The costs are phenomenal. Now, there are ways and means you can get around that. For example, this one is a mimeographed document. It needs more permanent form, as I've said before, but it stands through the years. It has stood and been used and reused and used again. Okay. This book was subsidized, the printing of it, by one of the banks. So if you have a good product, you take it in its manuscript form and you see if you can get sponsorship for it. George did. Be bold enough to go and ask. Depending on the expense of the book, you would have to go bigger or smaller, you know. And this one was subsidized by the project that he was working on for St. George's. So there are ways and means. I think the Grenada Ex-Servicemen Association gave some money towards this one. So there are ways and means of getting over the cost of publication. But the main thing is to get it down first, because you can't get sponsorship for something that you can't show somebody, and that they can't read and say, well, okay, I'll sponsor this or I'll sponsor that.
Okay. I know islands of conflict, it's fairly easy to access. Is there anywhere or any way that people who wanted to read more of his books can go or can do to?
As far as I know, and I might be wrong, the only two that are for sale in bookshops are these two. You can still buy them. This one, having been published by Macmillan, is generally available in Grenada and overseas. And it should also be on the websites like Amazon and Barnes and Noble. So this one is very, very accessible. I think you will find local bookshops. I know that the Catholic bookshop has this, being on the Dominicans, but I think I've seen it one or other in other bookshops. The rest, I doubt that you would be able to buy them now. I think they're all out of print. As I said, they were limited editions, and even being limited, some of the new copies were destroyed in the hurricane. It is not impossible to reprint them. All we would need is the interest and somebody to follow it up. This is the one I'm really begging for, though, because it is in in danger of disappearing because of the paper it's printed on and the fragility of the whole document. And this would not cost the earth to reproduce. Right here in Grenada, we could do a lovely hard cover edition of this fairly reasonably.
Yeah. Would any of these be available, say, like the National Library at all, or?
I hope that the National Library system has more than one copy. I hope. The Library of the University of the West Indies, the T.A. Marichaud Memorial Library, should have copies of each as well. Other libraries, I hope, have them. I think the only library that I can really speak to with authority is the one belonging to the University of the West Indies, Marichaud House. And they would have not only these 6, but they would have my missing, the one that's missing from home, and they probably have all of his documents, because while I was in charge, I made sure that they went in there. And thank God, the library at Marichaud House was perfectly preserved after Ivor. Nothing was destroyed, not even a leak. Thank goodness, thank God for the contractor and the builder who put up that building. It's really, really good. A testament to their skill, because the other side went down and the theater went down. But like that library, there was a guardian angel plus the original construction, good construction that saved that building. So we have all the books, and you will find all of George Brizan. Now, of course, you cannot borrow them. Lending books is a real hazard. You don't get them back, especially if they're out of print. So I don't lend mine, and neither does the University Center Library. But what they will do, you can pay for copying sections, or even most of a document. I think it's against copyright to copy the whole document, but you can certainly have a look at them if you want to.
Okay. Well, thank you very, very much. It was very insightful. I certainly learned a lot about his books this morning, and I appreciate it. I look forward, and hopefully your wish comes true, and there's a reprint of Grenadas Black Gold.
Yeah, well, George Brizan has left legacies in several fields, but a lasting legacy is what he wrote, and we have a duty now to protect and circulate what he wrote for the Grenadians first and the international audience after.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much once again.
Bye-bye.
All right.